What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Robert. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Robert, and boy, do we have special guest, repeat guest, Bob Glazer's in the house. What's up, brother?
Darius, how are you?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Looking forward to our show today. Guys, so Bob's multiple time guest on the show, author, friend from MIT, entrepreneur extraordinaire. We're here to talk about his new book that's coming out, Rethinking 2 Weeks Notice, Changing the Way Employees Leave Companies for the Better. For you guys that are not necessarily familiar with Bob and his work, he's the founder and chairman of Acceleration Partners, number one Wall Street Journal best-selling author, multiple books that he's just crushed it with around how to build better lives and better businesses. And he's a global keynote speaker and host of the Elevate podcast. So thanks for coming on the show, man. Appreciate seeing you again.
Thanks for having me back.
Definitely. So Bob, like for, listeners who are maybe not as familiar with your work, maybe if you wouldn't mind giving like a, quick like origin story overview on, how'd you get to where you got, how'd you become this guy that writes all these books and thought leadership around building better companies?
It's not where I started, but I'm a serial entrepreneur, not as someone who offered me what would have been the last job I ever took said, if you don't take this job, I'm not sure anyone will ever employ you again. And he meant that as a compliment. That like it was to create something new. He's like, look, you're not meant to be an employee, and that was right. So I've started a few different businesses, the largest of which is called Acceleration Partners. It's a 300-person global partner marketing agency that I'm now the chairman of. I'm still involved, but not on a day-to-day operating basis. The path of building that business over a decade, there was a lot of things I didn't like about the companies I worked for. And I started to think about ways we could change our industry and ways we could do things differently and be sort of the place that I would have liked to work. And in doing that, I started kind of writing and sharing ideas, both in the marketing industry with a book and then with a newsletter called Friday Forward that was just actually a note to my team that people started forwarding to other people. And that sort of led me to start writing about kind of culture and development and personal development in my kind of Elevate book series. And we'll talk about this 2 weeks notice problem, but that was actually one of these challenges that I sort of was trying to solve with the organization as we grew, because we had built a great culture. We had won 30 Best Places to Work award, but we still had the same problem that people left in this same kind of abrupt way. And it just felt incongruous to me. Yeah, you're trying to have an open and healthy culture, and you still have that same sort of doctor's appointment, problem. So that's I spend a lot of my time now trying to like figure out what are the key ideas and frameworks that could help both people and organizations kind of grow and meet their potential.
So when you start talking about, and obviously for people that don't know, like Bob's built, the business you built, Acceleration Partners, was, one of the top ranked companies, places to work on Glassdoor. You were top ranked CEO at Glassdoor. I didn't place quite as high as Bob, but I was number 9. So we're in an elite club. It's hard work to do that. You have to really be thoughtful about culture. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, I always say this, I go, look, if I talk, I both have coached entrepreneurs and CEOs, and you do it, now with a lot of youngsters we were just talking about. I still do it with a few different companies while I'm building my private equity business. But, having met a lot of entrepreneurs, having coached a lot of entrepreneurs, one of my observations is everyone always says, oh, if I say, hey, how's the culture of your business? Oh, we have a great culture.
Yeah.
And what I found is like, what's incongruous from my perspective is like actually most companies don't. It's like varying degrees.
And what does great mean, right? I always use, you and I have talked about this. I use the university example. Like, look, Wisconsin and Bowdoin are both great schools for the right people, but ostensibly, person going to one probably really wouldn't like the other, and vice versa, right? So they're really clear. Look, there are great cultures that are cutthroat and super competitive and appeal to like college athletes and people who want win-lose. And then there's ones that are overly familial and don't have a lot of, growth orientation and otherwise. And so it's really about just being consistent as to what it is that who you are and what you want.
It's so this kind of goes to values, right? Building a company where there's a common set of values, people understand what they are. I've even found that people like will say what the values are and they don't necessarily, those aren't what they are. Patty
McCord made this famous in her Netflix deck, right? Where the Enron's values were trust, integrity, and respect. And like, that is not how you got promoted at Enron. You took huge risks, stabbed people in the back, fend for yourself. Like, those were actually the behaviors that got you promoted and hired.
Yeah. So I think there's something there, which is like what gets you promoted, what gets you hired, right? Is really what you stand for, right? That's really the values that I think like are what's going to take you to the next level of the business is what's important in the business. What's important is what they value, right?
Employees are like children, right? And you seek parental approval, and that's the hires in the organization. So you will demonstrate whatever behavior is rewarded, either implicitly or explicitly. And so if companies' cultures are off, or they're not getting the right outputs, I always encourage them, as probably you do, to take a look at what they're actually rewarding. Are they rewarding hero hours and they're getting a lot of workaholism and burnout? Are they rewarding outcomes and people that focus on the 80-20? Inherently, like, I think companies are directly or indirectly rewarding the wrong behaviors in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so when you see that, and then we see this thought, the new book, and we start talking about this, rethinking the 2 weeks notice, right? People wanting to leave. I'm assuming people leave companies, and maybe there's a bigger conversation here because you've written a lot of books about company cultures and performance and people leadership. This is a book really around how employees think about leaving a company. And what I've found is that, people don't really quit companies, they quit managers generally.
Yeah.
And then there's a part of me that's like, oh no, there's a change happening with employees now where they're viewing, especially young employees, where they're viewing their experience of working for a company as not something that they're going to stick with. It's like they're going to go there, get what they need, and then move on to the next gig. And I recently was, I'm advising this company, this young entrepreneur, and he was interviewing a chief of staff. And he sends me the chief of staff's resume. Dude's 29 years old, right?
He's had 5 1.5 year jobs.
Dude, 5 1.5 year jobs. And he's
seen this movie. Yeah.
He went to Boston College. Dude's had 5 jobs. And I get him on the phone and he's like, hey, would you mind interviewing him? And so I'm interviewing the guy and I'm like, I just have to ask you a question, dude. Like, what's up? Like this is like, I look at your resume and I'm like,
and he's probably like, what do you mean? They were all great. It was like perfect. They were, yeah.
Well, he kept blaming some of it they were startups and they blew up and and some got acquired. So there were some legitimate reasons why he was moving along. But I was like, dude, I'm just going to tell you this right now. I know you're Gen Z and I'm Gen X. I look at your resume and I'm like, this dude better settle down or else you're going to blow up your ability to get jobs. Like what? Like so.
Is this a PG-13 show or can I swear on this?
It's R.
R. So you've heard the fable. You've heard the sort of asshole fable before, right? Like, if you meet an asshole at 11 a.m., he or she's probably an asshole. If you meet assholes all day, you're the asshole.
Right. Exactly.
So I feel like I'll give you you had this one bad blow up with your manager or company experience, but after 4 or 5 times, it may be that you're the problem.
And exactly. So it was funny to see that because I just look at. It seems to be this excuse that people have now that's like, oh no, this is how it is, culturally, hopping around. I'm like, I don't know, man. I think hopping around, you lose momentum every time you do that. So I mean, obviously,
this is such we could go in 10 directions with this. So it's sort of a yes and, right? There's there's a couple like hopping around. Like one of the things that when people talk about in my Elevate Your Team, like recruiting, I like to see people that have elevated in place, right? Because often the carrot of a new title or something when you get a new job is like, you're not going to leave unless I make you a manager, right? You're an associate. I'm not going to leave and make a director. So that's the carrot. So like, why are other people giving you this? Is to me is like the NFL every year. Everyone signs this crazy free agent thing. Half the contracts don't last 2 years. You were practicing with that guy every day. You saw him, whatever, and the other team's willing to spend twice as much money on him. So there's definitely this issue of the grass is greener. But there are a couple of things. But we are not in the era. So first of all, I opened my TED Talk by saying, how many of you are in a long-term relationship? People raise their hand. How many of you would find it awkward if your partner came to you and told you that they were leaving in 2 weeks and moving to a new city with a new partner and you had no idea? Right? And all those people raise their hand. So we realize that this is absurd in the personal contracts and really weird. It goes on all the time in the work context. So why does it go on? It goes on because of this era of lifetime employment and pension when you just didn't expect anyone to leave. And so it was a real trust and betrayal. But the employer was offering lifetime employment and the employment was offering loyalty. And like, that's dead and gone. If you go on Glassdoor and you go on the best rankings and you look at everyone's more mobile, you look at the top 10 companies, the average tenure might be 2.5 years across the organization. That's particularly because people under 30, 35 are like 2 years. They'll be like, 2 years, like it's good. So this sets up the problem, right? People are going to leave. They're very likely going to leave, at a middle level, at a 2 and 3 years, but we're still pretending like they're going to work for us forever. Therefore, our exit strategy involves obfuscation or getting frustrated or lying or doctor's appointments or whatever, and rather than just sort of acknowledge the reality and change this. Unfortunately, business doesn't have contracts like sports does, where you're like, look, we signed the deal for 2 years and we can cut you, but when it's up, we decide whether we want to pay more or less or just move on or we need a different thing. So the workplace has fundamentally changed. How people leave hasn't, and I think that's created a little bit of the disconnect.
And so, what is your first of all, I think everything you're saying is spot on, right? We're just getting really honest around what, there's a misalignment around expectations and behavior, right? To your point, the expectations are kind of built around a old incentive structure, which I don't even
doesn't exist, right?
Yeah. I mean, dude, I'm 46 years old. Like, I don't remember ever thinking this is my job for life ever.
Right.
So it hasn't existed since.
Because we were the first people to enter the workforce, post pension era, where it was like, look, if I just put in 15 to 20 years here, then I'm good and then I'm set. So we just never even entered the workforce with that compact, but the generation before us did.
Yeah, and so now the state of the workplace is no longer that. It's now kind of shifted in this other direction, which you have gig economy and fractional this and contractor that, and it's like this amalgamation of like people that are definitely going to be there, like almost like carnies.
It's just more like, if we think it's just more liquid, right? The job market is more liquid. If you grew up working in Pennsylvania in a factory, like before Monster or any of these things, like you could work at the two places you could walk to, right? And work. So work is more informational than physical these days. So it can be done places. And you can find out about jobs and whatever. So it used to, like, people were a little bit trapped before too, which I think then they sort of resigned themselves to long-term employment. But the entire job market is just more liquid if you look at it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if we're thinking of things as for instance, to your point, I could be a fractional CMO for 10 companies. That's my skill set is now liquid, right? It is used.
Or I'm in rural Pennsylvania and I can be a fractional CFO for a company in San Francisco, right? Which I couldn't have 15 years ago.
Right. So virtual, and you've done a lot of work around the virtual team member. You guys built your business as a virtual company, right? So I think that a lot of that, lends way to this, because there's positives and negatives of that. I'd love your opinion on like really like how you see us going back to people in office. That seems to be like a trend that's happening right now. Before we get into the quitting, it's like if we created this liquid environment, and I've seen a lot of people I know that are like, yeah, I'm done. Like this is not as productive as I thought. We need to go back to in office for as much as we can. What do you think about that?
I've watched this roller coaster. Historically, when we were all virtual, we never hired people that were sort of 22 to 25, like right out of school. Because I was like, it's actually not a great environment for a first job. Like, you want to get in there, you want to learn. If you're in New York City with two other folks in a 700 square foot apartment, like, do you really want to work from home? Too, like you kind of need somewhere to go for. So our company and our culture and the type of work we did was really conducive to, and the talent we needed was really conducive to that sort of environment. But we built our culture around hubs. We got together a lot. Like we had even though we were all virtual, I think we did it in a specific way. It was very aligned to our values. I found it really interesting over the last couple of years. The problem with some of the work from home stuff is that people don't have the right culture. They don't have the accountability and the outcomes and the sort of connection to do it well. And there's also this dichotomy you're seeing and you have a lot of people that are like, look, I want to work from home. I want to do where I want, what I want, how I want. Well, that's not a very team oriented, like go drive for Uber or, if you want to be a free agent, be a free agent, but being part of a team inherently requires sacrifice. So there's some things that are just better in person. There's connection and social cohesion. I mean, we always did all of these offsites and these big team events. We actually found that stuff super important, and we tried to build it into our culture. We had to do virtual offsites during COVID, and it was the worst thing ever. Like our offsites are always like 2 days. But the biggest problem you see is this thing where people, particularly maybe 35 and under, they want to work remotely, and then there's epidemics of loneliness going on and otherwise, and they're not really connecting the dots that like, if I'm 40 years old and I have 2 kids and I have a massive friend network and I live in a good sized house in the suburbs, I might want to like do my work and see the team and go in, and I can go to my spin class. I pick up the kid. Like I have a full, life. If you remove that social component from work and from people that don't have that or are sitting in a 1-bedroom apartment, it's not surprising to me that people are depressed and lonely. Like that was work provided a meaningful connection. So I think companies are realizing like that people need that there's certain things that are harder remotely. And again, it depends on the business model. If you're in client service, out serving clients in the field, and the best thing you could do is be going to them, then being in an office that doesn't match up with the team that you're working with actually isn't super productive. If you're in a product business and you're doing R&D and you're doing training and a bunch of this stuff, these are much harder remotely. So I feel like almost every company is coming back to like a 3-day in, 2-day out, which usually means Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in. I told people early on, it didn't matter what you did as long as you build all your systems around it. I've evolved to be like, I don't think the come in any 2 days a week makes any sense, because you should actually try to plan stuff when people are there that's meaningful. So it almost seems like every company is going back to at least 3. And then it's kind of this built-in thing where if you have a problem, you have to travel, your kid's sick, like you can work remotely for a week, but that's not the norm. So we're retaining some of the flexibility, but if you design a culture of flexibility and accountability, which is what we had done, it gives you a lot of options. A lot of people just don't have the culture to try to support what they're doing.
So let me ask you a question. With your business, you guys, you've had some major changes there over the last couple of years. Do you mind talking about that? Because you had built it remote. You guys had a couple hundred employees, everyone kind of working disparately, even internationally, if I remember correctly.
Although I had talked about this. It's not worthy of a book, but maybe a paper. We had sort of adopted the hub strategy of airlines. We're like, we also had these events. Our employees got together and we did this big company events. We're like, look, trying to move 200 people from 100 places is miserable. You also run into the actual logistics of state laws and employing people and, 5 full-time HR people trying to keep up where people are going. There's some real pragmatic stuff that the employees don't understand that companies have to deal with, like in terms of HR resources going to just like dealing with all state compliance stuff. The states are not up to speed on the sort of liquid job market. They are all trying to one up each other in terms of new laws and protections. And so you got to pay attention to them. And you got 8 weeks maternity leave in this state and 9 weeks here and parental leave. And it makes it actually really hard to do that. So we basically said, we're going to have hubs. So we'll hire people in these core geographic areas, within an hour of sort of a major airport. And we had some exceptions, but that way we can do hub activities. That way, like twice a year, management would fly to the hub and meet with the whole people in the area. That way, when we want to do an event, the hubs kind of fly in like a hub and spoke model. So we actually realized very early on the limitations of anyone can work from anywhere, and sort of moved away from that model. People still, oh, can I move to Tennessee? And you're like, no, we're not set up to employ people in Tennessee or in France. And by the way, it's really expensive to do that.
Right.
So again, your client service team might not be tied to your geography. So we've made time for those client service teams to get together, do offsites, go to visit clients. One of the problems for our model has been it's hard. We used to spend a lot of time out at clients. With the clients dispersed, it's harder to go visit them. But I think as they come back together, it'll be easiest. Those things are important. Taking a new client out to dinner, breaking bread with them, like those things are really important in client services.
Yeah, it's what you start to realize is, like, especially client services or anything that involves big decision making. Belly to belly matters. People like trust people that they hang out with, and that they look in the whites of their eyes and like, oh, I could see this is a good person. They're not going to like screw me or do something that like
totally
hurts my business, right?
Yeah.
I'm in private equity now, so we're always out there trying to convince people to take our money, and we're like, oh, you got to get in front of them, like human to human, or else they just like there's only so much that we can do, like that we're doing. Even you and I doing this right now, right? I know you, so it doesn't matter as much, but like it's always better in person. So yeah, I think that we're wired as social beings to like make those connections. So for you guys, so tell us a little bit about like what's happening in your business. Like, are you still like you're founder and chairman now? You stepped down as CEO once you guys like. Tell us a little bit about that. Do you mind?
Yeah, I had a very intentional. We have a private equity partnership as well. The company, I think every time as an entrepreneur you double your company, you need to take a hard look at like, do I want to do what needs to be done? I'm going to need to evolve if I haven't done this before. Do I want to do what I need to be done to be the CEO of a $5 million company, a $10 million company, a $25 million company, a $50 million company, $100 million company? And up to that point in the company's evolution, I loved working on the new stuff. Like I'm the ADD entrepreneur. I'm the R&D department. And it wasn't incongruous with my CEO job because I also had a president who was sort of the integrator in the traction visionary integrator style. And we have a great partnership and do to this day. But once we got to 300 people and I looked at sort of what was actually necessary and the meetings, and the job of the CEO was really managing a leadership team and focusing on the business today, I realized, hey, this next turn, I'm not sure like I want that job. And so I sat down with the president and we sort of did a plan to transition. I felt like the operator role now needed to kind of be the dominant role in the organization, and the vision could be the smaller R&D department. When the R&D became 5% of our business, not 30% of our business, it's just sort of the nature of getting bigger. And so he and I started like that 2-year transition process. We actually did the investment in the middle of it, and we're very transparent about it. And then about a year after we brought on our partners, I stepped down to 3 days a week and joined the board as executive chairman, and then stepped down again the next year from there. So it was kind of carefully orchestrated over a couple of years. I've done a lot of things wrong in my business over the year. I will say one of the things I think I did really well or right is that when we made that shift, it was my business. I had written books. I was a personality. Like I got out. Like I got out of those meetings. I pulled out of the things. I spent a lot of my time helping onboard new employees, running our leadership program, coaching people, working as a board member, things that didn't mess with the operations of the business. I let that team run the business, and I didn't make it confusing that I was in the room and people were still looking at me to answers and not Matt, our new CEO. So I had just seen a lot of those problems, and I just started pulling myself out of all of the meetings where I wasn't responsible for the decision. I had no accountability. So everything I do today is more about building the team and leaders in the organization, and a lot of like individual coaching with people and bouncing ideas off them and stuff. It's not getting involved with the running of the business day to day.
And so since you made that transition, like what's like what do you think was the one thing you would do differently, knowing what you know now? Like, or do you feel like you just crushed it and didn't make any missteps?
I probably would have sped it up a little more. I say to a lot of people, once you know what you're going to do next, it can be really hard to sort of manage out the thing. And I actually think we didn't rush it, and probably some of the things were a little slow where I was already mentally at the next phase, and I sort of still was physically in the current one. And at some point I had to sort of really, being a board member, being an employee has sort of conflicts of interest. And I had to kind of get out of that messy middle. I wanted to be involved. I wanted to hear the stuff that was going on, but like in some ways, if you hear all of it, then you want to do something about it. So
right.
Yeah.
So going back to the book, when we start thinking about like the changing workplace, and I wanted to give the listeners some context around your business, because I think that when you start talking about this new way about employees working together, I wanted them to really understand kind of how you've gotten some of this context yourself. But for yourself, when you start thinking about, hey, this is kind of a new environment, even using Acceleration Partners as an example, you guys, were hardcore virtual, and then you kind of did this hub and spoke model, right? This regional model, and really, there's a lot of learnings along the way. I think unless you go all in on remote, and I think the world was forced to do it, so it doesn't mean that they did it.
They went all in without any of the supporting infrastructure and culture, right? This was complicated.
Exactly. So I mean, I did the same thing. We had about 300 remote employees.
If you have a low trust culture and micromanagement, and you go fully remote, like that doesn't work very well.
No, it can be pretty ugly, and if it's forced, that's the other thing. If you do it over time, where you're just kind of even if you, I mean, look, it's never a good environment for that type of culture, but I do still think if you're doing it. If I say, hey, I'm running a virtual company, no matter what, if I have that, that's just going to be a thorn in the side of the business, but it's going to happen one employee at a time, right? Yeah. As opposed to what happened over COVID, which was I have 25 employees or 15 employees or 100 employees or 5,000 employees. And literally like overnight, it's like, nope, you're not going to the office anymore. Like that's kind of a shit show. And so it forced a lot of people to like.
Yeah, when is anything that you have to do on a mass scale that you've never practiced before, or done or had policies for, like go smoothly? Like rarely ever.
Yeah, probably never, right? So I kind of did the same thing you did, which was we built a remote company. We had 27 in office, and then we had about 275 remote. And then we unwound it where we're like, oh, I literally did exactly what you did, right? Yeah. And we ended up having, I don't know, 13 offices, maybe 100 remote, and another 900 were in office, right? In some capacity. I think outside, with the exception of our salespeople. And so, because they were all like kind of out in the field,
right?
Or for one of our businesses. And so, having done it that way, like one of the things I realized was what you realized, which was like, yeah, like, this isn't for everybody, number one. Number two, you have to have a good culture, and then you have to be super intentional about, to your point, accountability and structure. I was doing this during a pre-COVID era, and it did quiet quitting, and these things weren't really a thing. People would quit; they would do it like in the office, right? But
it's just this yin yang of power cycle, like where employees behave badly, and then employers behave badly, and like to me, I'm just trying to like, how do we not do this?
Exactly. The least amount of friction, right? And I think I've said this to you before. I think one of the quotes I've come up with in my life that I live by is like, scale is a friction removal process, right? So how do I remove this friction? And it can go both ways. It could be, as I'm growing the business, I know, to your point, that there's naturally a moment when people leave. It's very like loyalty is a gift, right? For people to stay forever is I love when people say, I expect loyalty, and I'm like loyalty is a gift.
And by the way, that you also will then surprise someone with their 2-week severance, right? I think about sports. It's again, sports people don't like the analogies, but they're just so good. Like, look, you might decide that you have a new quarterback, and like the big tight ends aren't really the right solution now, and you need to go running back. It's just time for a change. It's time for a different system. And I think employees have the opportunity to do that. Obviously it will, but employers too are like, look, I just need something different. This isn't working. You're a great BD outreach person, but our BD hasn't been working for years, and we actually find that partnerships and events are a better strategy. And you're not going to turn you in an event person, right? When Amazon switched from DVDs to streaming, they said to all their DVD engineers, "You guys are awesome, but we're going all in on streaming, and like, we want to help you find new jobs and move on." And Patty McCord's work at Netflix was a little bit of the genesis of this for me. And I was able to interview her. I just saw something like, go be from Netflix. Like, I can't turn your DVD engineering skills into streaming. So some of these things are just natural evolution, and these cycles happen faster than ever, right? So how do we make that okay? How do we start a real conversation, because the problems start earlier? And usually when someone gets toxic, it's because you haven't dealt with a problem. So Darius, it's December now, right? You're my employee. You're frustrated. You're toxic. You want to quit. Like, and now we don't have a lot of good options, and it's hard to do a transition period because you're already really pissed. Well, let's rewind the tape. In February or March, you started to get disengaged. I noticed it, right? You started to have some problems, your work slipped or otherwise. And let's say you're on my sales team, and I started to notice it. And I'm like, look, there's two things I could have done. Written you, hey, Darius's improvement kind of went down on his performance review. Or I could be like, hey, Darius, like what's going on? Like, you're definitely not engaged, your work slips or otherwise. And this is where I call this digging to the root in the book. First, we got early warning systems, like check-ins, start, stop. We got to collect data on like things that are going wrong and have psychological safety to talk about them. So I dig in. Now, choose your own adventure. Darius could, and hold on, I'll step back. We have these performance improvement plans, which sort of suck. Ostensibly, they're to stop you from being sued. They don't stop you from being sued. In fact, they're often a pretense to like catch someone so you can fire them, which kind of makes them angry. But that's like giving someone a Tylenol for the headache. They could have a headache because they're dehydrated. They could have a headache because they're allergic to gluten, or they could have a headache because they have brain cancer, right? It's not going to fix the source of the problem. So back now to this, it's March. I'm trying to get to the source of the problem. Like, Darius, you're definitely like, something's changed. So we have a real conversation, and you tell me one of three things. Tell me, you know what? I lost my wife lost our childcare, and her job, and I've been, picking up these extra hours, and I'm just exhausted, right? So that's a problem that you're going to have to fix with the company's help. And maybe you're missing some training. These is something like that. Something has changed in your environment, and I could help you with it, but there's going to have to be some change. Number two, maybe you say, look, like I switched to the sales team from the marketing team, and I really I miss marketing. Like, I don't think sales is for me. I was excited about it, but I don't think it's for me. Okay, so this is something that the company might be able to fix, right? I could say, you know what, the sales team would love to, marketing would love to have you back, and there's a slot, and you should go, or maybe not. But we can have this discussion at least that, and say, I know, like, hey, if you don't want to do in sales, then like we're gonna have to start to figure out how to get you a different job here or elsewhere. Number three is you come to me and you say, look, I know you guys are a remote company. I know I said I was into that, but I really I really want to go into an office, like or the inverse or otherwise. And you say, look, like, I call these things we're not going to fix. We're not going to change that. So by actually figuring out which problem it is, I can start working on the solution. The solution might be that Darius needs a new job, but I have some time to help you do that and look for that and support you in that before you become toxic and before we get into this negative loop of Darius is doing bad work, I yell at Darius, and then we get unrecoverable. All of those could become unrecoverable if we didn't solve it, but they have different solutions, right? The symptom is Darius's performance is down, but there's very different reasons why people's performance is down and different solutions. And if you get to these conversations early enough, you can have what the core premise of the book is, an open transition program where you say, Darius, like, you know what, actually, like, marketing is full. You definitely, like, the sales thing isn't for you. Like, why don't you start looking for a new marketing job elsewhere? Why don't we set kind of a, 90 or 100, you can interview, we'll start thinking about hiring a new salesperson, you start looking for a job, and we can have like a mutually, I still need you to answer those calls in the interim, and I'm not going to have someone in that seat or trained for 90 days, but this just requires a different level of emotional intelligence to know that you have people on your team who are leaving, and hence the term open transition program.
What when you do something like that, I'm assuming this is something that you guys did at Acceleration Partners. Is that correct?
Yeah, we this is what a program we ran for a year. Initially, we called it Mindful Transaction, and we just started it with this kind of notion. We just tried it on a guy who had gone through a PIP, and he got better, and then he got worse, and we were gonna have to put him on another one. And then we were like, and I was really frustrated with that we were still getting 2 weeks. I was like, look, why don't we have a real conversation with him? And he was just like, I just want to do something else. And we're like, all right, let's try this. You go look for that new job. We'll work on your replacement, and we'll kind of talk about it and communicate. We'd rather not fire you and pay you severance not to work. And in client service, it's super disruptive. And we got to swap in the new, manager. And when we turn this into a program, one of the key big points I make in the book is if you have a company that has a toxic, not psychologically safe culture, I'm not suggesting you start going and having these open, honest conversations if your company walks everyone to the door. This is a system that the company needs to put in place. When we rolled it out, we said to everyone, if you come talk to us and say you're not happy, you think you're going to do something else, we will not walk you to the door. You will not be fired. We will work with you. We'll get you into this program. Again, it's not going to go on forever. It's not going to be 2 years, but we will help you get to a better outcome. And you can go on Glassdoor. You can tell all your friends, if we lied to you about this, you can shout from the rooftops about this. And so it made it safe to start having those conversations. And by the way, we had a lot of internal transfers. I think people that we would have lost that said, I don't want to do client service anymore. I love process and operations. And we were like, oh, we're actually thinking about a training manager in 6 months. I would love to do that. Can you hold off for 6 months, and we'll get you into that role? Now, suddenly they go from orange back to green because they can do that role for the next 3-4 months, knowing that they're actually going to get into the thing that they want to do.
Interesting. How many internal transfers would you say you had? When you say a lot, it's a dozen,
I think a half dozen.
Half dozen. Wow. Okay.
Over the years, but by having those conversations. There was another story I shared in the book, and the thing about, we got a guy his dream job at another company because we had one of these early conversations. We knew he wanted to do data analytics. We weren't going to have that role for a year, but we said, let us think about it. And obviously this kind of can't go on like this. Again, you're starting to get frustrated. You want to be doing more data, not client service. A week later, a top Silicon Valley company sends me a thing. We're looking for a data analyst to run our program. Otherwise, we all looked at each other and we're like, he should interview for this. This is his dream job. It was twice the amount of money. He moved his family to California. He got the job. Imagine their surprise when I replied, you should interview one of my better employees, for this job.
Wow.
But we were like, look, we're going to lose him one way or the other. We don't have this job. He's getting frustrated. He's been there for 8 years. He's done amazing. Footnote, we just signed them as a huge client last year.
Wow.
4 or 5 years later. So it's a positive karma thing. I mean, a company that's done this, and this forever really well, is McKinsey, right? You tell McKinsey you want to leave, and you get entered into their goodbye party alumni program, and they basically create this entire, net promoter network of people that go on to hire McKinsey.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's yeah, to your point, that, I think BCG does that too, right? Where it's now I got someone that'll refer business to me, right? Because I treated them well on the way out. I had a guy that I did a business deal with a few years ago where it was a joint venture, and what he said something like, he's like, don't kick me in the he's like, don't kick me in the shins on the way out. He's like, it was some quote, I'm forgetting that, but it was some kind of analogy like that.
Yeah, right. And look, the data all shows, if you've run a conference or anything, which speakers matter most, the opening and the closing, right? Because your memory of the entire experience is sort of impacted by the end. This is why on vacations, you're supposed to plan your best activity for the last day, right? It's it sucks when your trip gets canceled on the way home, and it's just memory. So I don't think a lot of employees realize, how they're burning bridges at the end, and how their mentor who worked with them and then helped them and then found out all those doctor's appointments weren't it interferes with all the good work they did. And you forget that we live in a world of back checking references and LinkedIn. And so when someone reaches out to them in 2 years and says, how is Darius? And, my rule is always if there's a 2-second pause, you don't need to answer the question. Right. And they're like, Darius, yeah, Darius. Yeah. And you're like, so what you want them to be Darius was awesome. And by the way he left was awesome. So one of those employees that did that internal transition at our company has been with us for over 10 years and was a rock star. When we were hiring her, I remember we were hiring looking at two people, another guy and her in the finals. He was like, when do you need me to start? Like, F my old company. Like, I'll start on Monday, like whatever. And she was like, I really need like 3 to 4 weeks. Like, I need to leave everything nicely and in a bow for them and tidy up. Like she was clearly the better employee. Like she, and obviously like that has shown through during her time here. So I think employers don't realize that, look, this is on employers too. Like, not having the conversation, find out you're getting fired the first time you hear about the problem in 2 week severance, you can pretty much guarantee there's going to be a nasty ass review on Glassdoor, in a week or two that's going to hurt your recruiting. I think the pain is longer for employees. They don't realize that like the way you left a bad taste in someone's mouth, and that might become a problem for you years from now, particularly since a lot of people get pulled by managers or otherwise. You just 4 years of incredible work for that manager, and you kind of just ruined it in how you left.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always used to tell people that I'm like, there's a right way to leave. Like 2 weeks, 2 weeks notice. It's funny, even like it sounds like more than
in Europe. They don't understand this concept. It's statutory. It's 3 months. They don't even understand this and you can leave the same day. I mean, there's nothing that even makes it 2 weeks. It's just become a cultural sort of phenomenon.
Yeah. No notice. Well, when they do the no notice, I'm always like, that's just a hardcore fuck you. Like when you're just like, hey, I'm out. I'm like, dude. And what they're doing is they're pissed. They're being emotional. Sometimes they're selfish. But I think a lot of that's just like, hey, I the little leverage I have is I'm just want to like stab you with this like no notice thing. So you have to deal with the side effect of me being gone. But I used to say that like when I had like a lot of managers, I'm like 2 weeks notice. I'm like, guys, 2 weeks is 10 business days. That's nothing. Like 30 days notice is like,
right. People think that's
people.
Again, I don't know why it got normalized. People think that's respectful, and I say this in the book, but like, if you're a manager, you're like, dude, I can't even I won't even be interviewing candidates in 2 weeks. You're leaving me kind of holding the bag. But I get it. If you give 2 weeks notice, there's plenty of companies that walk you to the door that day. So you think anyone's going to give more notice than that? They're going to make sure everything's tidied up. By the way, one of the objections I get, well, people will behave badly. They'll steal. I'm like, no, they won't. Like you are helping them. This is in the open. They're leaving. The guy you have to be worried not about the people that quit and leave. You have to be worried about the people that quit and stay. The guy who quit decided 9 months ago he was quitting. He started copying his files then. He started interviewing. And by the way, it's all going to be buttoned up and stolen because he knows the minute he gives 2 weeks notice, you're walking him to the door that day. So ignorance is not bliss in this world.
Yeah, it's interesting. So is the book for employers, employees? Like, how do you think about who's the audience for this?
It's really for leaders and employers. Again, ideally, if your company ran this operating system or open transition program, I would give it to employees because I would try to train them that says, this is how we do it here. When people start at our company, we would tell them how we want them to leave eventually, because we want them to have those discussions. We sort of like, this is what it looks like here to leave well. So I can actually see it being part of onboarding, and because it's an important thing. But it's for the company, it's for the leaders, or it's for the manager. A lot of what I talk about in this book, you could run this as the default in your team, even if it wasn't the default for your company. You can have these open and honest conversations. You can support people while they're leaving. You don't even need to get HR's permission, right? You can go to HR once that they're deep in interviewing and are getting ready to move on. Like, it could look to HR just like it looks now, but you could say, look, if you want support from me and whatever, this is how I expect you to do it on our team. And I'm going to do the same thing for you. When it's not working out, I'm not going to surprise you and fire you. I'm going to sit down and have a discussion and say, Darius, dude, you've been red for the sales on 4 quarters in a row. This isn't going to work. You may want to start looking for something else, and I'm happy to support you doing that.
Nice. Yeah, I love that, man. So when's the book coming out? Where can people get it? I'd love to kind of give some feedback on that.
So the book's out. I'm trying, something new. It's out globally it's all in ebook form and audiobook. And if you're a subscriber to my Friday Forward newsletter, I put it all up there for free on Substack. I also put the first 3 chapters up there, so anyone can just go up and read the first 3 chapters and decide if they want to learn more. So that's at robertglazer.com, and you'll just see Rethinking 2 Weeks Notice on the top.
All right, so we'll go ahead and put that in the show notes. Man, I'm so pumped for this book, dude. I really think that like number one of the things I love about the way you always have practical advice, right? Like your leadership style is very like aligned with the way I think about things. So it's very good practical advice. And I think what you're really uncovering here is that, look, the system's broken. We've built this like weird system that's kind of happened organically, and it's misaligned. You know, there's a misalignment around what the reality is. And if we're trying to do what's best for the team member, if we're trying to do what's best for and making it a win-win with the company, then we really should kind of like rethink it. So I really appreciate your thoughtfulness around this, and looking forward to sharing.
Yeah, no one likes this problem, but no one knows how to move away from it, which is basically the reason why I wrote this book.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And having dealt with the side effects of people leaving unexpectedly, I mean, I had a rule in my business. I was like, look, like when we want people to leave, we need to like be really nice with them on the way out. You know, even if they quit on us, like give them severance. I mean, like when they leave. And my partners were always like, fought me on it, right?
Because you get this. You see that it's, look, if you could start thinking about past employees or ex alumni, like it's a very different philosophy. We do events and we invite our alumni to breakfast and dinner and at industry events, and sometimes we have more alumni than employees.
Yeah, man. Well, it's because you guys have built an awesome business. So that's incredible. Bob, man, anything else you want to share with the audience? If not, I think we're good here.
No, that was great. Glad we talk about this again. If this problem bothers you or resonates with you, jump on a Substack, read the first few chapters, and see if it could be helpful.
Awesome, man. So if they go again, can you repeat the website? We're gonna make sure
Robert
people get that.
Glazer, GLAZER.com.
Awesome. And guys, check out Bob's podcast, the Elevate podcast. You guys have amazing guests. Any guests you're excited about coming on right now?
I just had Jesse Cole come back for the second time of the Savannah Bananas. So we're going to run that beginning of January. And like, I joke with Jesse, I told him this, if you saw all his yellow stuff, you might think he's just this fanatical, irreverent kind of, gregarious person, but he is like dead serious about studying all of the greats of entertainment and building fans. And like, they are filling football stadiums and they have a 3 million person waiting list. Like, so like, he is one of the best business educators of our time. If you actually get to like sit down like I did and understand the methods behind the madness.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, we had him scheduled on the show and we had to get rescheduled. So I'm looking forward to having him.
It's very hard to get him. He's blown up in the last, 3 million person waiting list, like crazy.
Yeah, no, he's done some cool stuff. It is amazing. It's a cool, for listeners that don't know who he is, he basically took this, like the Savannah Bananas, which was, I don't even know if they were called that when
it's not even a minor league baseball team. It's like a below minor league baseball team, which typically lose money and empty stadiums and all that stuff.
Yeah, he like takes them now on tour to like massive stadiums and fills them up to watch these guys. I mean, it's entertainment, like more than anything else. I mean, these guys do like dancing, and it's really funny actually.
He's invented an entirely new category. So
that's cool, man. Bob, thanks for coming on, brother. Appreciate you. Looking forward to the book. We'll make sure we get that out to the audience. And till next time, peace out, man. I love you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. See ya. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers, and after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one. She's
my lover.